Inbound marketing has changed and allbound marketing is in. Welcome back to a fresh episode of BreakingB2B.com. I'm your host, Sam Dunning. And if you haven't yet, why not check out our weekday emails where I share unusual B2B marketing ideas, strategies, as well as fresh podcast episodes. You can join thousands of B2B legends. Head over to BreakingB2B.com and hit that newsletter tab. To join me today, I've got Jillian Als. We're going to be diving into how inbound marketing is changing, why the traditional methods of inbound may not be as effective, what allbound marketing means, and strategically how you can implement it into your business. Jillian is the VP of Marketing over at 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗲. Welcome to the show. How are we?
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Looking forward to getting stuck in. So we never beat around the bush on this show, Jillian. Let's dive straight in. What inbound marketing? I thought it was working like really well. I thought that was like a super good go-to-market strategy to drive leads or demos for your B2B companies. Is it not as effective anymore?
I think it's changed, right? It's evolved, and maybe with that, we've needed to rethink what we call it. I think inbound, the OG godfather of inbound is probably HubSpot, right? They invented the term, and, at a very high level, maybe oversimplified, calling it kind of like, if you write it, they will come, I think is definitely dead in that sense. But I think it's much more about being strategic, working with your partners across the commercial organization, finding out exactly who is in your ICP, creating the content exactly for them. Sure, you can use AI to help you with prompts or, fun taglines, whatever that might be. But honestly, you still need to be authentic and have a voice and know that you're solving pain points for someone very specific and kind of walk them through their customer journey, be it from awareness down to intent to buy, and also full circle into promoting you to their peers through dark social and all of the things that, we also hear about today. So in a lot of ways and how it maybe originated, like many things, I think it looks a lot different, at least, and allbound is something I'm kind of am dubbing the new go-to-market motion, if you will, for B2B as being a more successful way to look at it.
Got it. Well, we'll get into what allbound means and how marketers, founders, and such listening in can put that into play. So like you said, HubSpot pretty much coined inbound marketing whenever it was years and years ago with their SEO strategies, creating articles, creating blog content to rank on Google. It's a service we offer at Breaking B2B for many of our clients to get found by high intent prospects searching for your wares and driving leads. But are you saying that that's kind of not as good now? Or are we saying there's other routes to market? Or are we saying like what's the change between, say, 10 years ago and now 2024 moving forwards?
Well, I think it's just gotten harder, first of all, right? So you're not the only one writing about it, depending on what kind of audience your ICP is. There's no shortage of B2B solutions for companies out there. You've got the rise of AI, so people are just pumping out content. Then you've got Google, who, unless you want to click on their ads, want to keep you on the SERP, right? So content still, has a role. That I'm definitely not saying it doesn't. I just think it's harder to cut through the noise, get the valuable content that people really want to read, because we also know that we're operating in different circles. Yes, sometimes we do a search, but more likely when we already know what it is we're looking for and we're talking to different people in our networks and our Slack groups, wherever that is, this whole, again, concept of dark social. And then, of course, being exposed to ads and content in LinkedIn, either through new B2B influencers, if you will, or just simply paid ads, thought leadership ads, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of in-feed content game, that the social platforms and even Google to their, with their SERP results are trying to keep people in platform, which has really kind of changed that notion. It's not saying that SEO is dead. It's not saying that content doesn't have a place. I think it's just much more nuanced, and companies have to get smarter because it's just too expensive to just throw money at something that may work.
Yeah, it's fair. Are we saying that now there's almost way more channels and way more streams to get information, platforms to consume information, than there was, say, 8, 10 or so years ago,
Yeah,
when there was
absolutely.
only a couple ways to do inbound marketing. Whereas now, like you say, LinkedIn's a huge platform in itself that B2B folks, especially in the MarTech space, will be hanging out on. Slack communities, private Discord communities, all that stuff just weren't really a thing back then. Whereas now,
I think, I mean, chat rooms existed when the internet was born, right? So it's not necessarily new, but I do think in terms of your buying process and in educating yourself in, solutions in the market and finding solutions for your pain points, there's no shortage of ways. Then you've got Reddit and other channels that people are trying to break through the noise because no one wants to feel like they're being pitched or sold to, right? They want to find their own solution because they found it themselves somehow. There's a psychology behind this, I'm sure, failing to understand the terminology for it. But I think it's just wanting to stay in control and relying on, of course, your peers in the market a bit more than in the past. Word of mouth marketing, not dead, never was, right? And now there's just more places to find them in, like you said.
Yeah. So is it a case of I suppose we're saying that a lot of the inbound stuff still works, but there's more noise. And as you said, naturally, if you get a word of mouth recommendation from a peer or someone you trust, doesn't matter what channel, whether it's ads, whether it's Google search, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's YouTube or something like that, I suppose you're always going to trust something you hear direct from a peer as opposed to something you might stumble across for the first time cold or slightly cold.
Yeah, and I think maybe again to the point of what's evolved is also how we've started kind of democratizing information, that we want to be more social and, not necessarily just compete with each other or not, be too afraid to say the wrong thing. Or I think we just, as a industry, at least in marketing, if you're marketing to marketers, there's a lot of open forums and chatter. And I think, I speak from my experience as a marketer, but I assume and kind of know that exists in other realms as well. So it does build a little bit more trust in it. And then it's also, we didn't even talk about like the rise of review platforms. So in B2B, you would think G2 as the main one, maybe Gartner if you're really looking enterprise. So
Sure.
That concept of having that social proof is also nothing new. It's just more avenues, and how, when your marketing dollars are being squeezed, how do you focus? Where do you focus? I think is the really hard part of it.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many channels now, especially in the marketing space, that we're often sucked into. But curious, we were talking just now before we hit record that you've moved out of that ICP and now your ICP is more developers, right? Or ecom folks and things like that.
More on the technical side of the house, I would say, website infrastructure, e-commerce directors, people that probably have some business KPIs tied to the work that they do, but, the in and out of their everyday is making sure the website is up and running and not crashing and things like that. So they are more technical in nature and, have to find where they are and where they're consuming information. And if you come from the MarTech background, you're like, surely they're on LinkedIn, and some are, but, more lurking than potentially kind of the echo chamber that you kind of hear in the marketing space sometimes. So, we've done awesome meme ads on Reddit and had success, right? So we've had to kind of step out of that. I think if I go to a conference and don't see that MarTech landscape slide with all the little dots, I've seen that for a decade plus now, right? And that just gets bigger and bigger. And I feel that as a VP of marketing, like, I want to do this. But if I want marketing attribution software, I know which top 3 players there are in the market because they're good at marketing, right? They've exposed themselves well. I have relationships with a lot of people in those companies, even though I haven't bought from them yet. And the challenge is, how do I do that in the IT space, right? It's just a little bit of a different ballgame.
Yeah, I always like talking to marketing folks that aren't selling to marketers because, like you said, LinkedIn becomes a bit of a bubble when you're connected to a lot of those people, and they usually say the same stuff like conferences are dead and this is how you do LinkedIn, and no one responds to cold outreach and all that kind of stuff, when the truth is a lot of that still works, but a lot of them are kind of sucked into the sense that they're hearing what marketers are saying and they're a marketer themselves and they're not really dealing with other industries. But when you get into stuff like manufacturing or folks that aren't hanging out on LinkedIn or more traditional industries, you realize that a lot of these channels still work absolutely fine.
Yeah.
We're just so almost closed into this little space. So it's always nice to talk about this stuff. So with that said, that's inbound marketing. Allbound, what does that mean?
Well, for me, I guess I can only speak from my perspective, but for me, it's combining the go-to-market motion across all of the commercial teams, marketing, BD, sales, CS, essentially, to kind of a unified goal of, yes, revenue. And what does that break down to? Yes, we still need to drive leads, even though us marketers love to say leads are dead. They're not, right? We still need to understand who is in market, what's their intent, et cetera. But I think we can be much smarter about it and grow our businesses smarter by being very strategic about the accounts we approach and, understanding the signals that they're giving us of whether or not they're really ripe for a conversation. And to your point, when you're not in this kind of B2B world on MarTech, like, yeah, cold calling can work. Like, it is a way to get your company out there. Like, if I have a problem, maybe I hang up on the person. I don't hang up on people, but I actually really don't answer their calls, to be honest. But like, if I've heard the name, if I've had a conversation with someone, it might be that, no, that's nothing for me right now, but I won't forget that, right? We have examples of someone at one of the biggest companies in the world, I won't say who it is, responded to an SDR email, I think it was a year and a half after the fact. So he had clearly saved that email from an SDR. We're talking one of the top 5 biggest companies in the world, and got back in touch and just replied, was like, I'm ready to have a conversation. Like, wow. Okay. So I think it does and can work. It's just about being, partners in it. And this, need to kind of measure everything in marketing is also our Achilles heel, because we want to be like, we had that deal and, we brought this inbound. And then it also has created companies that, to be fair, where I work now, we still measure like what comes through the website versus what the BD team is doing, because we need to understand where do we put our investment dollars. But it's more nuanced than that, because marketing should hopefully have an influence on everything in so many ways, but I don't want to have to measure that to prove that. I think, we can kind of get overwhelmed in our need to measure things and create more divide than we create unity. So for me, Allbound is breaking those divides down, getting common goals, working together, being strategic, and closing bigger, better deals because it's more relevant. We're not selling something they don't need. We are creating the value together all through the process. We're enabling sales from like a product marketing standpoint, and working with our partners in CS as well to turn those customers into even bigger customers over time, but also as promoters, because again, social signals, all of those things, it's kind of comes full circle. So that's Allbound for me. It's really working as a unit versus individual siloed teams. And that takes common goals and new processes, the right tech stack, all of those things have to follow suit. And it's not something you flip on and off, but it's a movement, if you will.
Is that not just doing ABM, inbound and outbound marketing and demand gen?
Yeah, I think in some ways you could call it that. I mean, we have ABM campaigns, so it's not to say that it's one or the other. I think for me, in aligning internal stakeholders, it's good to have a North Star. And that is what we use the term Allbound for. And it's also a way to speak up and manage up in management that like, this is the thing we're doing together. This is not this ABM campaign versus, this BDR working on this particular account. Like it takes all hands to lift.
Yeah. How do you describe it? Like when you're getting buy-in for this with the exec team, and
depends
they say
on which
like,
exec I'm talking to.
Yeah, fair one. Yeah, maybe I'm financially driven, and I'm just like, what numbers is this going to do? Because
if you're financially driven, you don't care. You call it whatever you want. Just show me the money, right? It's more change management for people that have been working in certain ways for a long time, and don't break what's not broken. It's like, it's not broken, and we're not here to break it. Maybe disrupt it a little bit so we can do more. And it's not about taking anything away from anyone or reducing targets. It's really about the belief that together we actually overachieve versus kind of saying, this is my ball and this is your ball. But you can't like just rule out and like, we can't all just like sit at the table together all day and just chat. Like that's not it either, right? So I think there's maybe a concern that it would become ineffective, or, you know, it's just not as measurable, or it's not as like that whole waterfall math goes out the window. Like, no, we're still doing the waterfall math. But when it comes to practice and implementing it, we're doing it together, and we can go and reflect and say, were our assumptions true? Where could we tweak this to, you know, either do better, or, you know, where did we overperform and why? So it's not like we're not going to measure where things are coming from necessarily. It's more about creating the strategy that's, you know, tied together, so the marketing's not off, you know, doing a campaign to a persona that BD is not calling to, and that, you know, we're incentivized to work together. So, for example, we're starting to feed inbound through our BD team. It was traditionally sent straight to AEs because of, you know, the intent, like why create friction in the process? I'm like, because AEs should be doing multi-threaded enterprise deals. They shouldn't drop everything to get to a lead in 5 minutes. But with my marketing hat is, yes, you do need to drop everything and get to a lead within 5 minutes, right? So how do we balance that? Well, hey, guess what? BD has tons of structure and is talking on the phone all the time. And this would be a welcome conversation for them because it's a totally different conversation. And they probably would enjoy that in their day, but it also builds up skills and helps them get ready for potential promotions into AE positions, et cetera. So just a small example of where we see this kind of practically being implemented in the organization I'm at today.
Interesting. What are your thoughts on, I'm guessing they're probably different to mine, because this is going off on a bit of a tangent, but if someone books a demo or a call for your website, some argue that they'd want to speak to an expert or engineer. Doesn't necessarily have to be a product expert, but it could just be a salesperson that knows the offer.
Yeah.
So they can kind of handle questions rather than just doing 30 minutes of qualification. They can maybe ask some qualifying questions,
we don't.
then go to the product. Can business development folks do that if they're more junior?
If more junior, probably not. And we don't disagree on that. You know, I think in the ideal world, I would do the full motion of let's remove friction from the demo booking completely, and not, you know, if the technology is there, qualify, are they in our ICP, then it routes directly to, you know, choose the time on the calendar, let's go. Reality is, and maybe hopefully some of you are listening, you're just not there yet necessarily. And what do you do in the meantime? And what's the kind of benefit of, you know, getting to it faster versus, you know, waiting and not being able to provide that. The other thing, particularly in the instance that I'm talking about right now, is we have really seasoned BDRs, right? So that's not always the case, but we're all in probably a different organization than we were maybe 2-3 years ago, unless you're in, I don't know, cybersecurity or something, but that like rampant growth where you're just hiring, you know, 5 SDRs every month to feed your AE promotion pipeline. That's not really the case anymore. So you've got more experienced SDRs, and they're also needing development. So for me, like I have no qualms, and we have a process in place where we wouldn't set someone who's, you know, a month into the role on the rotation for speaking with inbound. But we have a pretty seasoned BDR team that I feel really comfortable with having those conversations, and I don't think it's wasting anyone's time.
I respect it. I like to challenge processes.
Yeah.
Now, I went off on a bit of a tangent, but from what you were describing on Allbound, it sounds like it's more than a marketing channel. It's more of a complete go-to-market strat, really.
It is, yeah.
So you mentioned like combining sales, customer success, marketing, being strategic with the accounts. If you're doing some inbound or some demand generation, then also the outbound team are kind of trying to work those accounts at the same time. So sounds like there's quite a lot to it.
Yeah, and I think it's baby steps, right? So you could spend months designing the ideal Allbound strategy, you know, but in reality and implementing process is hard and it's tough, and technology is sometimes with you, sometimes it's working against you. Legacy technical debt, so to speak, in your MarTech stack can hurt you. So it's about one step at a time and finding those wins and successes. And to your point, it is more of a go-to-market strategy than it is a marketing thing. I think the unique part of marketers and marketing in an organization is we're by nature pretty good communicators, most of us. We have a unique kind of spot and maybe even responsibility in the organization to lead change that way, I think. And, I think I wrote it to you at some point. Like, I see kind of marketing not going from marketing equals inbound to marketing equals the stewards of Allbound. Like, I think we think about it, right? Because the definition of insanity is banging your head against the wall and expecting a different result, right? So when things aren't working the way that they used to, we got to do something different. And I think many parts of the organization can feel that. And it's just like, but what's the answer? And so here's one big bet. And here's, some baby steps to get us there.
Do your sales team report to marketing?
No. Nope. And BD doesn't report into marketing either. So that makes it even not difficult, I guess. But I have really good partners that in my kind of regional VPs of commercials. So they own BD, sales, and CS. So that makes it easier that we're aligned and want to do this and make this shift together. So without that, I don't think it would be possible. My previous organization, I did lead up the BD efforts, but it can work even if marketing's not responsible.
I can imagine it's quite difficult depending on, I don't know how many folks are within your sales, CS, and marketing team, but I imagine for larger orgs, it's probably quite a lot of implementation time. Like, once you plan this out to get everyone working together.
Yeah. And I think when we've launched it, we're actually still in the process of launching. It's more like, we know we haven't thought of every edge case scenario. We know there are cultural differences. So I work in a very global organization. We're calling into and working accounts in countries 24/7 across the globe. And everyone has a different tactic and a different way of, having those conversations. But process and stuff like that, I think, showing some early successes and also just being really upfront of why we're doing this, what we expect, what are our leading indicators of success, what is lagging. Of course, maybe revenue is probably a lagging one, even though it's the ultimate one. And keeping people informed and being very transparent, humble, and, fully willing to just roll up your sleeves and get in there if, something doesn't work as planned, or, on the positive side, if something is going really well, like, okay, what else can we do? But I think it's building trust in the organization is probably the enabler to be able to do it.
If a B2B marketer or founder tuning in is thinking, quite like the sound of this Allbound marketing, what are some of the kind of very first baby steps that they should take?
Internal alignment, that this is something everyone, especially in the leadership team, wants to do. More specifically in the commercial leadership, like I said, your CFO just wants to see the money, so he's like, do what you want as long as all things lead to the target, if not more. RevOps, solid kind of tech stack and process support there, I think is a big part of needing that alignment as well. Tech stack, you can get there if you're not there already. Just putting in the time for it. But I think it starts with alignment at the top and saying, like, we need to maybe potentially change the way we talk about it, right? Because if we do this and we still continue to separate out how we talk about, well, what's inbound doing? What's marketing doing for this versus what's BD doing? It's still going to create that division. And I think you need to allow that it's going to take some change management if you're doing it very separated today, and kind of understand what that looks like, and stopping yourself like, okay, yes, actually my weekly email needs to start changing because I've always reported on inbound in my weekly email. Like, I need to talk about Allbound in it because, yes, I'm measured on what has come inbound through the website, but I'm invested in what the company is doing as a whole. So it's change management at the highest level.
Got it. And are there many changes to how you report, like you mentioned there, like we've had this many inbounds this
Yeah,
week.
and I think you asked about how to implement. So we're actually implementing it as a POC, right? So we're not, is a nicer way to kind of calm the organization to say, hey, if this is not the success we know it will be, then it was just a test, right? So with that, we're making a POC kind of dashboard and, combined metrics. So I'm aligned with my commercial leaders on what those should be, what they should look like, how we want to report on them in our more global weekly calls and things like that, so that we talk the talk, right? So that's a big part of it as well. And I think, we're going to have to just learn as we go with it and support each other. But I think, again, just to repeat myself, that alignment is there, and that's really what can enable it.
Got it. And does it change a lot tactically in terms of like the actual marketing channels you use, i.e. whether that was doing events, your outbound team doing emails, doing cold calls, your marketing team doing SEO or paid ads or review sites or wherever your buyers hang out?
To an extent, I think when you're more aligned, like I was, in a weekly kind of revenue all hands, and, the BD team's really frustrated with what's going on with, retail right now. Okay, like that's a trend. Should marketing still be running full force against retail if, we're really struggling there? And our BD team has started to pivot towards, well, I'm actually getting people in government to pick up. It could be that we should still be running and doing demand gen in retail to make those calls easier the next time they try. But I think it's more just about having awareness and transparency between the teams, and not necessarily changing tactics, but identifying when maybe we should test something new. So I don't know, you're gifting, for example, like that's a big ABM tactic. We haven't done it. Should we do it? I don't know. Let's test it. Let's, as part of this Allbound measure, like, our US team feels pretty strongly about it. Our EMEA team is, maybe tried it before without success. So it's a little bit like, maybe we can test some things together versus here's marketing's new way of, doing things, do it, right? So I think it opens those conversations to potentially test some things together instead of testing in isolation.
All for experimentation. Do you folks tend to run much in the way of kind of unusual marketing experiments?
That's a good question. I don't know about unusual. I think
I just like the
word. We do test, right? I mean, like I said, we're even implementing this whole kind of inbound via BD as a test, right? And we're not doing it in every region. We're doing it in just EMEA and North America to start with. So I think it's about the nice thing about having a global organization and a big team is kind of like, well, we can try it here, and if it works, then we can try it there, and if not, then that's fine. It works there, but not there. Unusual tactics, no. I think we found that memes work. Funny enough, that's not super unusual. We did some mockumentary videos that you've like maybe start to see on LinkedIn. Our performance marketing agency convinced us, and we did a one-day shoot that was really fun. I haven't, they've gotten more engagement. So in that way, they've been great for us, but we're just trying to keep the door open and not just get too set in our ways. But I'm also fine doing things that don't scale, right? So LinkedIn, for example, works for us in some countries, but in Japan, where we do a lot of business, LinkedIn's not a thing. And there's actually not a one-to-one platform. Like, well, where can we target the people and make the lists and stuff? And it's not the same. So then I'm like, all right, well, let's do this. That's not scalable, and it's going to take a ton of hours, but let's just try it. And then if it works, then we figure out how to operationalize it. So.
Yeah. And do you tend to go in with like a hypothesis of what you think might happen, and like, we'll give this like a 3-month window?
Yeah,
we'll chuck X amount
depending on what it is, right?
Cash,
so yeah, like even this inbound POC that we're doing, we're giving it to the end of the year because it wouldn't be fair to evaluate it after a month. Like, we need to get our sea legs, so to speak. So I think every test has its limit, and every marketer has had that doom and gloom of like, oh my gosh, I just, I wanted to test this. Like, when do I cut it off? I've already spent X amount of dollars and haven't seen what I thought I would. But sometimes you got to stick with your gut, and sometimes you got to be like, yeah, no, this is not going to work. I don't need to wait the full month to see that, right? So it's just keeping an eye on it and having, what you define as success before you jump into it.
Yeah. Do you feel there's any types of companies or sizes of companies in B2B that are not a good fit for Allbound?
I would say early days, right? Like you kind of need, in some ways, you're probably doing all found in early day kind of startups anyway, because everyone's wearing a ton of hats.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not all that different. And it's just you kind of are still figuring out what works. And you're probably doing still a lot of like founder led sales and they're having the conversations. Then so it's probably not the biggest fit there. Maybe on the opposite side of the room is these giant corporations. I haven't worked in one in a while, so it's hard for me to say. I think it requires some agility, which is, startup scale up world you kind of have, and you can still have close enough relationships because you're not a 20,000 person company. So that your relationship is, like I said, like a big part of this. So I think it works well in the scale up phase where you're also having to create process anyway, just by nature of the business and the growth journey it's on, and formalize that a little bit. So it works well then. Not to say it couldn't work in others, but not speaking from experience on those.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, like you said, I mean, that's very much the stage of my business, Breaking B2B, is at. Like I'm the founder. I run a lot of our sales calls. We run experiments most months, whether that's around cold calling, cold email, different LinkedIn approaches, weird SEO tests and stuff like that. So I love the flexibility that we can kind of run whatever we want whenever we want. But in that same time, you sacrifice more time than cash. So there's, as you scale, it's more things maybe can't get signed off as quickly, but you can allocate more resource to it or more cash to it. So there's always kind of constraints depending on the size of your business, right? And what you can
and the maturity, like how do you have product market fit? Do you have, like, you need certain check boxes, right? And it's just, I think I was at a conference where they talked about go-to-market fit and when do you need to evaluate that, when, because, there's a couple different ways you can grow a business geographically, product-wise, or you can go up market, down market, these kind of things. It really just kind of that matrix depends. Hopefully you're not trying to do all of it, but I think, when you've established a solid product market fit, you've got a good customer base, you maybe have a well-seasoned team, that's ready to do it together. I think it works probably better than early stage or when you've got a really green team.
Cool. Jillian, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Appreciate the
Thanks
transparency. No worries. Appreciate you going through the process and sharing kind of what's working for you folks and the ins and outs. With that said, please do tell us more about how everyone tuning in can connect with you, learn more, anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm actually not here to sell you anything. If you want to check out 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗏, you're more than welcome. We help some of the biggest brands on their biggest days, is what we like to say. So if you've been online, you've probably experienced the 𝗥𝗲𝗃 system. We have lots of great things that we're working on. So if you're curious, by all means, but I'm sure I'm just talking to marketers right now. So thanks for having me, Sam. I don't have a pitch, so to speak.
All good. In that case, everyone can follow you on LinkedIn for more of your wisdom. Appreciate you coming on. And as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, check out the weekly email over at breakingb2b.com. And with that, I want to thank you, Jillian, and thank the audience for tuning in. And with that, we'll catch you on the next one for more no BS B2B marketing tips, stories, and insights. Cheers for tuning in.